one thing that was interesting in here, and maybe the last part regarding this book, was that I saw that you mentioned that you had decided prior to becoming chairman that you were only going to do maximum two sort of stints.
Well, let me just tell you, you do that on the basis of your prior experience, and I had seen people who stayed on too long. I was the program director at Wills under Thomas Duane, who many people don't remember him anymore, but he was in charge of what they called the Duane series of ophthalmology, which was a prominent textbook that followed the Duke Elder series by a few years. At any rate, he probably stayed on a little bit longer than he should have, started to develop some dementia problems, and fortunately stepped down shortly thereafter. They did bring a person in, didn't work out real well for a while, then Dr. Tasman was appointed. And unfortunately, from my perspective, Dr. Tasman stayed on in that position until he was in his 80s. And he was making decisions that were going to affect the future, even though it would have no impact on him at all. And from my perspective, I just could not see that that was a rational thing to do. Also, at the same time, the chairman at the Hahnemann Drexel University was a similar guy, Myron Yanoff, who had been the department chairman for many, many years, and again stayed until they closed down the program into his 80s. And I just couldn't see doing that. So I came in here, I had just turned 51 at the time, and I said, I'll do this until I'm about 65, and then I need to turn it over at that point in time. So I made that arrangement. I told the dean about 18 months before I was going to step down that I would step down, and there's a variety of things that are a little strange about that, but nevertheless, and then when that time came, I did, and I felt never look back.
And you told the dean that 18 months in advance that it was going to happen,
and
that's
yet a
search didn't start.
So the story is, I told him that so that he could start a search, knowing that when Dr. Good had stepped down, that there was that abrupt transition. It took almost 2 years before they appointed me as the next full-time chairman. And I said, let's avoid that now. Let's get started on this. Well, he did nothing. So 3 months later, I went back to him and I said, I told you I was going to do it. And then after that meeting, I put it in writing to him. And he still did nothing. And then another 6 months went by and nothing had happened. And so now it's going to be another 6 months before I'm ending. And finally, at that point, I told him, I wrote it to him in a letter, and I sent a copy of it with it to the president of the university. And the reason I did that is because we at that time had some grant monies from Research to Prevent Blindness. And Research to Prevent Blindness had some rules. It's a private organization, so they can have whatever rules they want. But one of the rules was, as long as you have a permanent chairman and there's no transition, your funding from them, if you've established it, can continue. But if there's any gap in the full-time chairman position, then the funding stops. And once a new chairperson is appointed, he has to be or she has to be in that position for at least 2 full years before you can even apply for any more funding. And then you have to apply for half the funding you were getting before, and you have to fill out much more detailed information, which I had done when I first got here. We went back and looked at the numbers on that. If we were to lose this, we would literally lose well over $1.5 million in funding support. Still nothing happened. And by the time I finally stepped down, there was still no committee had been formed. And so the day that I was to schedule, he asked me if I would stay on for a while until they find somebody else. And I looked at it and I said, under no circumstances would I do that. I gave you 18 months.
That's bizarre.
And well, his comment to me was that the Research to Prevent Blindness requirements were silly. And I kind of looked at him. I don't care what you think of them. Those are their rules.
Right.
And well, so he didn't do anything. And then actually, it was still over a month before he even then started to form a committee after that to then look at various candidates. Dr. Golnick was good enough to take over as the acting chairman of the program. It took them a year then to appoint him. And it just such a waste.
Yeah. But I mean, at least it was sort of internal in the sense that Dr. Golnick was already here.
Right.
It
wasn't a difficult transition.
Right.
That's right. It wasn't a difficult transition, but they didn't need to lose $1.5 million to do it.
So since then, have we reapplied? Have we gotten some of that back?
I don't even know. I suspect that Carl has done it, but I stayed out of the loop on that one. Now, of course, I guess he would have had to have done it here recently, so I don't know.